Bitcoin is a relatively new asset class, and the market for Bitcoin is subject to rapid changes and uncertainty. Bitcoin is largely unregulated, and Bitcoin investments may be more susceptible to fraud and manipulation than more regulated investments. Bitcoin is subject to unique and substantial risks, including significant price volatility, lack of liquidity, and theft. Bitcoin is subject to rapid price swings, including as a result of actions and statements by influencers and the media, changes in the supply and demand of Bitcoin, and other factors. There is no assurance that Bitcoin will maintain its value over the long term. ARK strongly encourages any investor considering an investment in Bitcoin or any other digital asset to consult with a financial professional before investing. All statements made regarding Bitcoin are strictly beliefs and points of view held by ARK and/or podcast guests and are not recommendations by ARK to buy, sell, or hold Bitcoin. Historical results are not indications of future results.
By the way, I saw a tweet from ARK Invest about some photos from back in 2016. Did you know that Tuur, that's the first time you guys met, right, Tuur? You met Cathie and I think Chris Berniski?
I believe so. We visited a little office in New York, somewhere in Manhattan. I remember the bull statue because you guys have helped launch like a 3D printing.
Yes, that July we had just launched, and CBOE 3D printed a big bull for us, and it is here with us in St. Petersburg. It's gone everywhere with us. It's Noah the ARK.
Oh, I love that. I love that.
Yeah, a lot has changed. Wow, 8 years. Oh, no, actually a little more, maybe more like 10.
8 years. So if it was 2016, we had just published a white paper, Chris Berniski, in collaboration with Coinbase, which was in its Series B at the time. It was doing its Series B, and it was called Bitcoin Ringing the Bell for a New Asset Class. Talk about, many people, they didn't even believe that Bitcoin was a thing at that time. And here we were describing a new asset class. So I'm really proud of that work.
Yeah, no kidding. I'll jump in and just say why the heck I was not reading that white paper. I don't know what I was doing, but I wish I was reading that white paper. I may just tee it up to just say congratulations on publishing the 2026 Big Ideas report. So
Thank
10
you.
years later.
Yes. And you're right, 10 years later.
Yeah, and I'll say this, and we can just jump right into it, and maybe I'll tee it up with you, Cathie. I like that you used the word Bitcoin and big and bold right in the table of contents as a big section of the paper. I'm just curious, maybe you could tee up like the history of the paper as well as some of the big ideas leading into this Bitcoin brainstorm.
Sure. I did try and get our design team to print out the B in orange, and we got kind of halfway there. They did the border. They had their own aesthetic. So, but yeah, we have featured Bitcoin in Big Ideas since 2017 when we started doing Big Ideas. And I remember in the early days, as we were trying to help people understand what is this in our markets, we were appealing to tech investors. And I remember saying, well, okay, you know what VoIP is? VoIP, VoIP? Well, this is MOIP. Money over IP. So, we were trying to get everybody to relate, to the idea that this was a new technology too, and was going to be transformational in a way that, many people in our industry did not expect. And, as recently as, it was 2020, Goldman Sachs put out a piece about the 10 myths about Bitcoin, or I don't know if that was, our retort was, we're debunking these myths. Those were, I think they were 10 disses, the reason Bitcoin wasn't a real thing. And, so we did our 10, ways to debunk those myths. So think about that. That was as recently as 2020. And then, of course, we moved into COVID and, all kinds of things happened, but, the massive liquidity around the world sloshed into Bitcoin, of course, and all crypto assets. And then everybody wanted to learn about it. So our big ideas, and by that time, we were starting to delineate why we thought Bitcoin had miles to go in terms of price appreciation. And we delineated it by category: digital gold, institutional investment in a new asset class, emerging market insurance policies against the destruction of wealth, either by inflation or outright confiscation of wealth, and so forth. And I guess just updating and bringing us up to the latest, haven't changed our price target in a number of years. In this episode or issue of Big Ideas, we did focus on stablecoins, usurping one of the roles we thought Bitcoin would play in the emerging markets, and that is the insurance policy, the hedge against destruction of wealth and purchasing power. Stablecoins are serving that purpose much more now than we expected. But that doesn't mean that the digital gold role is going away. In fact, if anything, with the gold price hyperventilating, that we see with intergenerational wealth transfer, a lot more price appreciation because of digital gold. And even in the emerging markets, right now they are hand to mouth. But if we're right, and all of the new technologies that we discuss in Big Ideas 26 come to pass and proliferate around the world, there will be wealth generation around the world like we've never seen before. And I think with emerging markets' proclivity towards stablecoins and the digital money world, I think Bitcoin will be a very big part of their savings.
I'm going to jump in here, and I'm not going to ask Rafa when he was at Goldman if he was part of the DIS team in 2020. But
no, but I know the CIO, well.
Okay.
She's not a fan of Bitcoin.
Oh, really? Interesting. And I'll get the Tuur on the price projection. But I'm curious, Alex Gladstein, I actually listened to your podcast recently with Balaji on the network state that you were on. And I think you touched on this distinction between the stablecoins and Bitcoin that he even brought up. I'm just curious your thoughts on Cathie's point there.
Sure. Well, we tried to break it down into the utility of both technologies. They're obviously very different. They are constructed extremely differently. They do extremely different things. And unfortunately, I think the average, let's say, retail person, I don't really think grasps that. But what we were trying to say is that Bitcoin is freedom technology. And, you could say stablecoins are humanitarian technology, but they're not freedom technology. They don't provide you censorship resistance. They are number go down coins that is baked into their very behavior, as Jeff Booth has pointed out. They can be blacklisted en masse, and they're our central point of failures, right? So they clearly aid people who are stuck in very bad currencies. And that's why I think it's pretty hard to argue that they're not in some way humanitarian technology. And I think that's very interesting. But I would absolutely try to differentiate them from Bitcoin, which is freedom technology, which gives you sovereignty, where you can build real privacy and obviously protection against inflation and currency devaluation. So that's kind of what we're sussing out there. So
I think that's a great distinction, really great distinction. And before we go further, Rod, what I'd like to say is the research in Big Ideas is a product of an incredible analyst team here, research team. So when I talk about all of this, I am really representing our research here, and so many other people deserve the credit for it.
Totally.
Including Lorenzo and David Puel, who has done our Bitcoin research.
Rod, I was going to just add, and Tuur, I think it's a great point. I think people forget because we have USDC and USDT in our wallets and you can transact with it. I mean, the very big difference with Bitcoin is, it's still very much centralized issuance and management, right? Like you're you have it in your wallet, you can use it, but like it can be freezed, right? If it is used for illegal activities or, for other reasons. I think, that's the real big difference with Bitcoin. Like if you want something that is completely out of hands from governments or companies or anything, like Bitcoin is the unstoppable asset, right? In that sense. And so, I think as kind of the cost of transacting and storing money will go to zero over time, I think it makes a lot of sense for these companies to obviously use blockchains as the underlying kind of operating system, but they're still very much companies, right? And so I think that this is like a big difference where, and myself, like I saw, sometimes I forget about that because we just transact and, we hold the stable coins, but like this is a big difference, like to me.
Yeah. And, I will say that I feel a little bit responsible, not on purpose, but I was on CNBC talking about stablecoins. They ran with it, didn't focus on this. Wait a minute, gold has just doubled. The digital gold role of Bitcoin, that has only increased in value here. The one other thing, Rod, and then I'll tone down just to.
No, please keep going.
Yeah, just doing the correlation between gold and Bitcoin has been illuminating. Put it in a year-end letter that I did. From 20 through today, so we caught the swoosh from COVID and we've caught the various corrections since then. The correlation between gold and Bitcoin has been 0.14, almost nothing. And I found that interesting. We throw it in there as digital gold, and it is digital gold. But there's still a lot of education, I think, to take place, over the next 5 to 10 years.
Rod, can I jump in here and add a couple of things? So, first of all, Cathie, you did a much better job than I did. In 2015, I was at Deutsche and I tried to present Bitcoin there was kind of like this big ideas team at the end of the year, like most of the companies do. And I remember going to the CIO office and they're like, oh, actually, and the theme of that year was outside of the box teams, right? So I had just started really thinking that I understood something about Bitcoin. Now I know that I didn't know anything, but I picked it up. And it was part of my presentation. I presented a couple of things and I talked about Bitcoin. And I wish, I positioned as you did as more. I think that's a very clever and good way for people to understand. My presentation lasted 3 minutes and everybody said, there's absolutely no way we're going to ever put this in portfolios of our clients. This is money, magic money from the internet, so it didn't go that well. A lot of those people I still keep contact with and, they, just as you said, they came around and a lot of them are actually asking more and more about Bitcoin. It's phenomenal to see, I think, what we've seen in terms of institutionalization of the asset class just in the last 3 years, right? But when you compare to like 10 years ago, it's massive. I never thought we would get where we got. The other thing we mentioned about emerging markets, I grew up in Brazil, so I saw hyperinflation, up front from very, very close. And going back and talking about Bitcoin with people, I think there are two different things that really resonate with Brazilians when we talk about Bitcoin. The first one, they immediately get the medium of exchange, store of value part. But then it's natural to go to the dollar because, in Brazil, everything is pretty much dollarized. And it has been this way since the 80s, right? So when you talk about real estate in the long term, we talk about anything, dollar is your way of thinking because the local currency just loses, value much quicker. And they get that, and I think that's why it's easier for them to start transacting in Tether and other things, because for them it's just digital dollar, right? The time that, they kind of switch about in Bitcoin, I tell them the story about in the 80s, and, I've told the story a few times. The first time I saw my dad cry was when, in the 80s, Brazil, because they had massive hyperinflation, everybody used savings account as their checking account, because savings account would actually accrue interest daily. And from one day to the other, the government decided that, people are not spending their savings too much, and they decided to confiscate the savings of the whole population. And you can imagine that, overnight, literally, I remember like the 9 p.m. news coming in and saying, oh, from tomorrow, you can't use your savings account. And the moment I remember people about this episode, I was like, remember this, and, that this happened, and overnight you had your money confiscated. Yeah, that cannot happen with Bitcoin. Bitcoin has everything that you have in medium exchange, store of value, but also it's unconfiscatable in the sense that, what happened here. And that clicks immediately. It's like, yeah, actually, that's an asset that I should have in my portfolio.
What year was that?
And then I think it was 88 or 89. It was a little bit before, Brazil actually had it, or actually early 90s, because Brazil had the turnaround point in 94 with the Real plan, where finally the dollarization mindset was broken. So a long story, but that's when Brazil actually started to really put inflation under control. But when I grew up, money would literally like lose value overnight, right? I remember like my mother giving me money and saying, just spend it. Don't bring it, don't bring money back because in a week this is going to be worthless, right? And that kind of like, I think, shapes the way that the population has a relationship about money. But just going back to conclude on the first point, you also mentioned this. I think it's very easy when you're having conversation with institutions. The best way to have this conversation is to go back to their language, right? And talk about asset allocation and, how Bitcoin fits in a portfolio. Forget about, looking into all the qualities that we know it has just on a pure risk return basis and correlation. It fits in pretty much any portfolio, right? The right answer is not having any Bitcoin. Is how do you size it accordingly to your portfolio and to your targets? And every time that, at least with very sophisticated asset allocators that I turn the conversation around that, I say, okay, give me what your asset allocation is. And let's see, just in a matter of, and I know it's past return and who knows what's going to happen in the future, but you can't ignore an asset class as, it has a Sharpe ratio better than all managers that you have in your portfolio that has lack of correlation to the major asset classes that you have in your portfolio. It does have a place in a portfolio. There's no question about that.
Yeah, and maybe I'll pass it to Tuur, who's actually been before even Cathie. I think you've been investing and analyzing in Bitcoin since 2011.
Yeah, I first wrote my first pieces on Bitcoin in 2011, and then I was very excited that Zero Hedge accepted my submission in 2012. So that was like my first English, foray on Bitcoin. Yeah, very lucky in that regard. So yeah, it's such an interesting time to think about Bitcoin now. We're like 1 year into Trump being president. Obviously, there's a lot of green lights now for institutional adoption, and we're seeing it happen. And then at the same time, we saw this big gold and silver rally, like really something that the world has been, especially the investment world with an eye on inflation and inflation hedges. They're really having their moment because they always recognize the importance of having, hard liquid assets that have low counterparty risk like gold. So they're really having their moment at spotlight now for the last few months. And so I'm kind of still going back and forth in terms of what is my thesis. And I stick with the thesis I put out pretty much about 6 months ago. I put it out, an update on my report and my Bitcoin report, which was basically arguing that the 4-year cycle is over, that we are seeing a lengthening in Bitcoin cycles. And I think what's happening now, I was honestly surprised to see the Bitcoin price this week and see it go down to like 80,000. My intuition is that some of the money that would have gone to Bitcoin has gone to gold. And I think there's also been selling from longtime Bitcoin holders. And I think what could be happening is a kind of a shortening of their time horizon. Like for longtime Bitcoiners, a lot of them are kind of my age or younger, kind of like millennials. So they were like, this is retirement stuff. I'm here for the long haul. I'm never selling. And then all of a sudden you see the geopolitical situation change completely, drastically. Like kinetic war, people talk about it everywhere. Obviously the war with Ukraine is still happening. We're heading into situations that are close to the beginning, what could be the beginning stages of kind of like civil war type situations. And I think a lot of Bitcoiners are cashing out partly just because they're digging a trench for their family, or they're trying to kind of, make some decisions that they feel are necessary, and maybe also doing some diversification, just trying to be responsible. And also the on the inflation front, we don't yet have a completely dovish Fed. So it's not completely clear that light is on green, even though if you look at global M2, it's on the rise, which Bitcoin has always followed. So this is one of the rare occasions that Bitcoin is actually not following the rise in global M2, which I think we should attribute probably to the gold and silver rally. But yeah, I do think investors are going to cycle back from gold to Bitcoin, which if you go back to, I guess you could argue even back in 2012, there was a rally in gold that was then followed by a Bitcoin rally in 2013. And 2016, you saw that too, a rally in gold that then later turned into a Bitcoin rally. So in some way, you could argue gold is actually kind of a canary in the coal mine for Bitcoin, even though strictly speaking, there's not a direct correlation. There is that kind of potential causal connection, which to me makes total sense, that would be the case. But yeah, I think all the signs are really positive for Bitcoin. I would be very surprised if we turn into a bear market. I think part of why there is trepidation now is just because we're at that late stage of what traditionally was a 4-year cycle, and so people are expecting for prices to go down now. I mean, in a way, you could argue they are going down, expressed in gold. Like we went from 32 ounces per Bitcoin to 17 ounces today. If I look at it technically, if you look at the Bitcoin price expressed in Bitcoin, I see support at around 14 ounces, which would be, the equivalent today of like $65,000. And then I see resistance at more like 25 ounces, which would be like $120,000. Of course, but as the gold price changes, those dollar amounts completely fluctuate as well. So for me, the big picture is really looking at that 1 kilogram of gold, 32 ounces, as the big level, the big resistance. We've been bopping against that for 4 years now, which is quite incredible. And I think eventually we'll push through it. I think it's going to happen this cycle. So over the next, 12 to 18 months. But maybe gold will do something really crazy, and we'll kind of have to, be humble for a little bit and wait for the next cycle. But that's not really my base case. My base case is that even in this cycle, we will go past 1 kilogram of gold per Bitcoin.
That's really interesting. I put this in the New Year letter as well, because just trying to get some perspective around gold and how does this compare to what has happened historically to gold. Now, what we did is we took the market cap of gold relative to M2. Now, it was US M2, but I don't think it would be much different. And the reason we used US M2 is we could get it back through the Great Depression. And so if you look, and we did this today in our economics meeting, if you look at gold relative to M2, we're at a 1.56. And there's been only one time we've been higher. And that was in the Great Depression when we got to 1.71. And back then, the way we got there was gold was flat. It was fixed at $20.67. But the money supply imploded. So the denominator imploded, sending that ratio up to all-time highs. The only other time it's been anywhere near here was in the late 70s, when, of course, we were having gone off the gold exchange standard. We'd been a decade or more in a very bad inflation. Inflation interest rates at that time were in the double digits. But then once the Volcker/Reagan plan started working, and I think we're in a very similar environment right now. I think Trumponomics is Reaganomics on steroids. Once that started to gain traction and people understood the returns on invested capital, in the United States were going up relative to those in the rest of the world. The gold, that ratio went down, down, down for 20 years until 2020. So I think we're in rarefied territory. If I were a holder of gold, I would be uncomfortable just based on the perspective I've just shared.
You'd be selling, Cathie, and
I'd be selling. I'd be buying Bitcoin.
Yeah,
big time.
Yeah, and to add to what Cathie just said, if you look at the gold oil ratio there as well, you see it blinking the traditional signal that gold is overvalued versus gold, and it's the time to actually exchange and go back to oil. It has that really nice kind of a fluctuating pattern over the years. But that said, I do think, investing in it's getting tricky to invest in operating companies that have a lot of boots on the ground, so to speak, or physical infrastructure, just because the political situation in so many places is getting so volatile. So I think that's another kind of notch in the belt of Bitcoin, which doesn't suffer that problem.
The other thing missed from the discussion is now that, of course, the price of gold is so hot. It's at the end of the day, everybody just talks about demand, but the supply side is going to get affected later this year, right? There are a lot of mines that weren't profitable are going to become profitable. And the gold, different than Bitcoin, doesn't have a difficulty adjustment every 2 weeks, right? So the supply is going to be an issue. It takes time, right? It usually takes, a year or so, but eventually it will come at some point.
Is it really that quick? I mean, maybe I remember when I was in my gold analyst days, like 15 years ago, I thought it was more like 3 years or something like that to like really ramp up production. But maybe I don't know. There is some capacity that they can add in the short run.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm going to switch gears slightly because this Big Ideas report has so much in it, from Bitcoin, AI, robotics, and so on. And one area I do want to, we mentioned Trump a few times. Raise your hand if you led engineering and built Trump Social. Oh, that's Alex Gleason here. Yeah. So, one of the things here, Cathie, you say it, and I have been taking it and always attributing it back to you, this convergence, right? From all of these different areas, one being Bitcoin, AI, and energy. I am actually curious, Alex Gleason and Alex Gladstein, this convergence as it relates to Bitcoin and AI and decentralized social media, if you will. How do you guys see this kind of playing out leading up to 2030 as a date?
Hey, everybody. Alex Gleason here. Not to be confused with Alex Gladstein, although proud to share the name. I'm a longtime open source developer, and I briefly worked as the head of engineering for Truth Social, Donald Trump's social media platform. And then I left it because I was, after failing to convince them that they should be using freedom technology. So then I went from there to be developing on Noster. And Noster is a decentralized protocol that's kind of like, so Bitcoin is freedom money and Noster is freedom everything else on the internet. And so we can use that to build social platforms. We can use that to build bridges to sort of connect the social fabric through the internet and through computers, and also to enable gateways for people to exchange Bitcoin and to use Bitcoin in more meaningful ways. And with AI now, it's becoming even more impactful to be able to do that. I've been building AI agents, been building tools. Shakespeare.diy is the biggest one I've been working on to enable people to use AI to build Noster clients. Also enabling people to exchange Bitcoin in new and interesting ways over the internet. And it's really exciting. Things are changing a lot, big time. And we're going to have to adapt to it.
And when you say things are changing big time, I mean, we agree, couldn't agree more. But what are some of the biggest surprises to you, if any, in that regard?
So code, I mean, I guess I was surprised that my job was at threat as a programmer. But I think we're actually going to be okay. I'm not so doom and gloom anymore. Maybe a year ago I was a little bit worried, but now I feel like our jobs are just changing. Nobody is losing their jobs. We just are changing and adapting to a new way of doing things. And so it's becoming more about figuring out architecture, writing context files, and my job is actually transitioning more to be defining criteria than it is to be literally writing code.
That's reassuring to a lot of people. But I will say we do see entry level jobs are where, young people, 16 to 24 year olds, the unemployment rate there now is over 12%. Partly for this reason, you're able to, leverage your gifts. You know what to do. They need an entry level job just to kind of get on their way.
I think young people actually have one of the biggest advantages right now because they're not so stuck in their ways about how they need to do things. I think that the people who are sort of mid-level, they're actually the ones who are at the most risk. Because there's people who are senior, they know how to like train the AI to do things, but the young people are not so actually knowledge is kind of harmful in this scenario because you have expectation.
Yeah, Alex, and I've been saying this on almost any webinar or whatever, trying to encourage young people because I couldn't agree more. When I started ARC in 2014, it was a white sheet of paper and I honestly didn't know how to start, many of the business side of things. Now you can go to ChatGPT and basically say, or Claude, which I know is, the preferred one these days. Hey, this is my business idea. I need to figure out where to start and just start vibe coding and maybe use Replit or so vibe code. Get going.
Use Shakespeare.
Yes. Okay. Shakespeare. Get going. Just do it. Right. And,
Totally.
There's nothing like starting a new business. Nothing. So I think this is we're going to see an entrepreneurial explosion as more and more young people harness.
Absolutely. It's a new renaissance.
Yes.
Yeah, it's really neat. We've been tracking this because we have an AI for individual rights program that we launched last year. Very, I would say, timely. And as we got started, vibe coding was invented the same month we started the program, basically. And it started out in an exciting way where we saw a glimpse of what you could do. But it was kind of like people were getting stuck deploying. And again, you could, like last summer, you could programmers could do cool stuff, but the average person it was a little tough to see how it was going to make an impact. And then fast forward to the last 6 weeks and it's just crazy. Now I had no code and I built like 3 cool apps in the last 10 days. And I think the question is, can we actually make the infrastructure freedom tech decentralized as opposed to relying on Anthropic, et cetera? And the explosion of open source projects happening right now is completely flabbergasting. I mean, it's jaw dropping. The stuff that's being created, both hardware, software, that's happening right now. I've never seen anything like it in terms of the speed. I mean, I think it kind of reminds me of the late 90s, when I was a kid, when new software was coming out really fast and really exciting things were happening. And, but I was still on dial up, right? So you're still waiting, but a new thing would come out and it would be so exciting. I really haven't felt that speed yet. Bitcoin's been a long, slow burn. You know what I mean? But this thing is happening so fast. It's absolutely insane. Obviously the Claude bot, which is, I think a new innovation in personal computing. Basically, it's an open source project. It's 19 days old and it's already something that David Sachs is talking about. So the speed of these projects and the way that they capture the interest of the broader public, I don't think we're prepared for it. It's so cool and so crazy. So maybe HRF's role can be, how can we kind of follow this momentum and then make sure to be there to invest and support people who want to make sovereign versions of these things. So, there's a way to do Claude bot in a way that's way safer. How can we make sure the activist is doing that as opposed to giving someone invasive access to their computer and all their accounts? There are ways, right? So can we make freedom boxes physically for people? Would that be fun? It's kind of the new wave of personal computing is basically what I would say, where you can actually have a freedom box and tell it to do whatever you want. It's kind of what Siri was supposed to do or whatever, but you're starting to see we're going to have that. And we just want to double down on that hardcore. It's very, very, very exciting.
May I ask a question about that? I think a lot of people after the Llama 4 kind of flop and the ceding of open source to China. So DeepSeek and Quen and all of those. I think many people thought the U.S. had lost had lost that battle. What I'm hearing from you is, there's a resurgence here, which is very exciting. I love open source. So,
well, to be clear, I mean, a lot of the top open source models are Chinese. But I mean, it doesn't really matter. I mean, it's some of them are European. I mean, I think the success of the Chinese open source models pushes the Americans to do more.
Which I love. Yes.
It's not like one step forward continually. There are steps that are coming. It's like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, but it's clearly we're pushing in that direction. And yeah, like Americans and Europeans right now are coming out with some of the most exciting open source stuff in AI. Like Claude was not Chinese, right? So I think it all works together. Like my favorite app right now that just is my daily driver is Maple, because especially when you turn on private search, like it's basically as good as Gemini, except it's not leaking any information. It's like Signal for AI. And I just use it for all my basic stuff. You can use it for health, nutrition, and you don't have to worry about your stuff getting leaked out or being monetized. I think it's actually incredibly important. So I gifted it to my whole family for Christmas. And I'm just a big believer in having a really easy to use, elegant phone app that does everything you need it to do. And it's encrypted. And I get that people aren't quite interested in that yet, but I think there's going to be these moments where, if you remember when after Gen 6 happened, like there was a huge exodus of people to Mastodon for like a moment, right? But it was like a big deal. And then of course there was the blue sky moment where like we're talking about millions of people making a collective decision in a matter of a couple of days. That's eventually going to happen with private AI. I just don't know when. It could be a while, but eventually people are going to be like, wait a second, I probably don't want to be sharing like, my personal photos, like, and just having them be hoovered up by OpenAI, which just admitted it's going to be basically like taking a share of the profit generated by your stuff. So we couldn't be prouder to support Maple, and hopefully we can see a lot of clones of this out there as we move forward.
I just wanted to follow up on that quickly because I've had a personal experience with it. I have a DM relationship with a number of, important people in the tech world who are leading very important companies. And some of them refuse to DM with me unless it's encrypted. And for a time on X, I couldn't get encrypted. And so I was cut off from communication because they were the ones who decided if you want to talk, if you want to have a conversation with me, is going to be encrypted. Figure it out.
I mean, that's great, but they probably haven't fully linked it. I mean, those same people might be messing around with Claude and letting it just go in their computer. So I think there's it just takes time. But once it clicks, and you realize how awesome it is to have a fully encrypted AI assistant on your phone that can't monetize you and doesn't know what you're doing. Like, wow, that's awesome. So I view our program and, all the collective energy we've brought to Bitcoin, like when it comes to AI, our goal is going to be, how can we really make this thing about personal computing, literally, and sovereignty? And I think the stuff Alex Gleason's building is amazing and very in line with that. And there's just a lot of momentum right now. I know that sometimes you can look at the news headlines and be like, oh man, dark, but it is freaking exciting from a personal liberation, global scale standpoint from software. Like it's a crazy moment right now.
So a question on that topic, Alex, you both Alexes, I think you should have a good understanding of this. And I've been an open source developer. I helped open source for a long time. And everything that I see in NI, I think that now open source is inevitable for two reasons, right? You can reverse engineer anything out there. Anybody can reverse engineer anything out there. And then second, I think understanding code and contributing to code became much easier, right? Anybody can open the Bitcoin, GitHub, clone it to your local computer and put an AI agent on the side and explain to me this, and that, and actually contribute to code. How do you guys see open source going forward, given these things are definitely going to have an impact, I think, on coding?
I mean, I've been developing with AI. So what's your concern, I guess?
It's not concern. I just, think that this should be, as we were talking about positive things about AI, this is something that it's rarely talked about. But one example, I was reading a tweet about somebody that received like the MRI results from him. He did an MRI test. He received it in a CD-ROM, and he put it in his computer. And then it's like, I want to read this, and the software costs, I don't know, like $300 to get it. And he went into an AI agent and said, build the software for me, and the AI agent reverse engineered the whole thing, right? So what are the impacts that would have, I think, in everything that we do, right? Because software now changed, the way we interact with software changed significantly from the past, right? And how is that going to change, I think, not only Bitcoin, but the software industry in general?
Yeah, I think it's very exciting. I mean, I think we're seeing a Cambrian explosion right now of new open source apps. We're seeing it in Noster too. People are developing hundreds, thousands of Noster clients just experimenting. And so I think we're seeing like experimentation happening 10 times, 20 times, 100 times faster. And so, and people do experiments building entire companies, and then the company fails, and we can do these simulations now essentially of building a company and watching it fail so fast that we know that that idea didn't work. I want to address people have all of these concerns about like AI slop and like this is going to make things worse, but actually humans contribute slop. And all we're doing is we're allowing these things to play out 10 times faster. So I think the big theme is acceleration, but also it's not just acceleration above us. It's acceleration from a grassroots perspective too. Regular people are now on the same playing field as big tech corporations. And so for me, it's a major win for freedom, for decentralization. Obviously, I'm betting big on the fact that these models are going to become cheaper. I'm betting big on the fact that the open source models are going to become better and eventually become the norm. Because those are also like sort of baseline criteria for this dream that I have. But that's basically my outlook on it. Do you agree, Gladstein? And
There's so many of them, and every couple of weeks they improve, right? So they all have their differences. But really, I think what you're going to see is that the real innovation is going to be in the kind of user interface part of it. That's why Claude Code and Cowork are so crazy.
The body.
It's the terminal's been there, but now you can just kind of like use a ChatGPT like wrapper type thing, and you can do anything you want. It's really crazy. So you don't have to deal with the CLI. So I think what's cool is when you're in Maple, it has like, do you want to do reasoning or image analysis or whatever, right? In a little check down thing. Then you can go to advanced and you can just choose your model. And there's like 10 powerful open models. You can mess around with it. So I think these like front end user facing things will be able to draw from all the top models, and you just pick your poison. You just, pick whatever you want to use. But I think the window, to Alex's point, is going to become vanishingly small. The difference between what you can accomplish with fully proprietary black box closed source stuff and the open source world. And in some cases, the open source world is just going to destroy the black box thing. Like Claudebot could have never been built by a company for a million reasons. Like a company would have just never been interested in building such a thing. So yeah, again, bullish on open source.
I wanted to add, I view the LLM as being like a brain, and then the tools that people build around it as being like a body. And I think that we hit a point last year where LLM capability has somewhat plateaued. And I'm sure LLMs will get better, but it seems like, they're putting in different training data and they're getting back, maybe this is a little bit better and this part is a little bit worse. I think it was a big wake up call when GPT-5 came out and Sam Altman was saying it's like literally the Manhattan Project, and people were like, actually, this is kind of worse in some ways. So I don't really see the major advancements in AI coming from the creators of the models at this point. Really, the only task for like them is for open source models to catch up. The biggest advancements I think we're going to see this year are around the body of the AI, which are all of the ways that you interact with it. And Claudebot is a really cool example because that's kind of bringing the AI to life in a way where it has memories, it can remember things. It can manage your schedule. It can do tasks periodically. It has a heartbeat where it, every so often it repeats certain checks. And you interact with it by connecting, say, Telegram signal, some other means to be able to communicate with your robot, and then you tell it who it is. and you tell it what its goals are, and then it configures itself. And then from that point, like we recently added, so my project is called Shakespeare, right? And I created a mascot called Quilly. And Quilly is a virtual, like, digital assistant powered by Claude bot. And so I onboarded Quilly into our team Soapbox room. Soapbox is the name of our company. And then I onboarded him on how to use Noster, and he generated a Noster key for himself. I say he, but we're talking about an AI here. And this is all just over Signal messages.
Like in the last 2 days, obviously.
Yeah.
So now he's managing a Noster account for himself, and I have him going in and checking for updates and Git repositories to see when we push interesting features. And then he goes and he makes marketing posts about it on Noster.
Just a final piece of thought. It's like you're going to go from needing to go to the library to use the computer, which is like early stuff, chatbots, to the iPhone, to like the Iron Man suit. Like it's getting real crazy right now. Is all I got to say.
So, Alex, I have a quick question. Can you, is part of the plan to give him a Bitcoin wallet and let him manage his own Bitcoin balance?
Oh, I mean, one of the first things that we did was someone said, "Hey, can you generate a Lightning invoice from this?" And then Quilly's like, "Yeah, let's go. Here it is." And then someone paid the Lightning invoice, and then I checked. So he had generated from my address, and then I checked in my Albi, and sure enough, the payment went through.
Oh, nice. And then, but I guess the next step would be that the AI would have its own, that you don't even have access to, like its own wallet, which was something that was speculated a couple of years ago by Dhruv Bansal. Basically, that we'll have this ecosystem of AIs who each manage their own monies, bank balances, Bitcoin accounts, and they wouldn't have bank accounts because then you have KYC issues, obviously. But so that would be kind of creating this kind of balance between different AIs rather than have one monolithical AI ruling them all.
I think that's big. And I think that Noster is the perfect firmament for that to occur in, because Noster is a permissionless protocol. And one of the biggest barriers right now to sort of this thing spreading out all into the world is all of these walls and barriers that are preventing us from doing things by these big tech companies. And you're absolutely right. We're going to be seeing agents exchanging Bitcoin autonomously over the Noster network.
Or eCash. It might be eCash, but we'll see.
Or Cashew.
Well, this is actually maybe a really good point to kind of slowly wrap up on. And this is exactly why I wanted to bring Tuur, who's been a longtime Bitcoiner and big time thinker in the space, Rafa, who's leading arguably the largest private Bitcoin mining company in the world, Alex Gleason, who's building just amazing decentralized apps and stuff over there, and then obviously Gladstein, who's leading the efforts across globally on the human and freedom rights side, and then of course Lorenzo and Cathie on the digital assets side. I think we're all super bullish on 2030 by 2030, but I'm curious, like, what's maybe from Gladstein mentioned the Iron Man suit. If we could just dream a little bit, what does the world look like in 2030? Just out of curiosity.
I mean, forget 2030. I mean, like, hopefully later this year. I mean, I think that, I mean, the stuff that we do, obviously, we work with political dissidents and opposition movements and troublemakers all over the world. You could have those in any context. They could be inside a large company. They could be inside of a town. They could be, at the level of a nation state. But the point is, people trying to change society for the better against long odds are usually under-resourced against their adversaries. And in this particular case, like, labor market, yeah, it might be bad. Like, people in the middle of the curve might be needing to find new jobs. I actually think so. In many cases, like mid-level, I agree. But when it comes to freedom fighting and small organizations trying to change the world and individuals changing the world, this is absolutely amazing because, I'll just give you an example. Like, if you're a nonprofit and you want to make a movie about your impact, think about all the stuff you used to have to do to get that done. Hiring numerous different companies dealing with software that kind of sucks. You're not very good at it. You either try to do it yourself. You don't know how to use iMovie or whatever, home video stuff. It's bad. So you have to go pay. You have to deal with someone, contracts, payments. And if you're in Nigeria, you can't pay them US dollars. So there's just like so difficult to actually do something kind of simple. And then I just used like Claude Code the other day to like, I was like, here's some videos from a surfing trip. Please make a video, a movie out of it. And in like 25 minutes, I have like the sickest video that like it did with music and everything. So I just think you could think of little tasks like that that are actually important for organizations, whether it be marketing or accounting or legal, like, wow. Like, so you're going to see a huge rise in a 10x or 100x in, I think, the capability of small organizations. Whereas like for big nation states or companies, yes, they'll linearly get more powerful, but like they already have armies of people, accountants and literal armies and other things. I think this really, really amplifies the power of the individual in the small organization. That's kind of, I guess, my bullish case.
Well said. Rafa, how about you?
Yeah, I think for me, I'm biased, so I'm going to take it from the mining side, right? I think we are at a crossroad now, and I think this is going to be before 2030, but I think we're at a crossroad now where we're seeing, an energy transition, with renewable, of course, distributed grids, smart demand. And then we're also seeing a monetary transition, right? And that's where Bitcoin comes in, being decentralized, digital value, crosses borders or beyond borders. And we're starting to see, I think a lot of people really realize the fact that, there's a new kind of energy consumer out there, which are Bitcoin miners. And this confluence between, I think, energy and money, I'm very, very bullish on it and what it's going to bring. Examples about that, like we've seen, like we're deploying now in a place in Brazil, very remote, that has excess energy. They overbuilt in wind and solar. They don't have anywhere to send the energy, right? And up until now, what they were working there was like, oh, we can just buy batteries and we're going to put batteries here. And after a few conversations, we go to this energy company and say, no, why would you do that? The batteries, of course, cost you a ton of money and they have their own environmental issues, right, that you have to do it. We can just plug a Bitcoin miner and get, a few containers there and then store it in what you really want. Because at the end of the day, you want to, as a company, you want to make money, right? So we're actually going to deliver the best monetary asset in the world. And even if you don't care about Bitcoin, you can just sell it every day. And just seeing the conversations, how they're heading, and I think how people are actually, from all levels, right? From the individuals that work in these places to governance, to companies, I think we're up to seeing something very, very big for mining and for Bitcoin. And this is going to look very different in a few years than it is right now.
Yeah, I agree. And I think Cathie and Lorenzo, you guys highlight the distributed energy and a number of other energy pieces in the Big Ideas paper. So definitely take a look at that. Alex Gleason, how about yourself?
Oh, I think that, there's this fantasy that people imagine when they see how things are moving with AI, where they picture like UFOs and some, variation of the Jetsons or something happening. But I think that probably things are going to feel normal. I think that for the most part, we're still going to be living in this reality. There's still going to be tables and chairs and outside still going to exist. There's still going to be trash on the street. But I think we're going to see rapid acceleration online in the digital world. And I will say that my mission is to bring Noster and open source and freedom technology to be the main way that people are engaging online.
Well said. Tuur, and then I'm curious on Lorenzo and Cathie as well.
The way I see it, in the world, we're seeing a massive breakdown of the post World War II consensus, pretty much. Like the idea of like how the world works and how the world should work. All that is breaking down. It's a big question mark. Like what's next? And I think throughout history, whenever we saw those kind of, moments of shifting, those periods tend to be really chaotic and highly politicized, obviously. And so I think one of the things that Bitcoiners will see themselves kind of being forced to do is to align themselves with certain institutions, which even if you think about it from the AI point of view, is like AI is great, but it also means that people who want to kind of undermine your activity or steal from you or attack you. Like I'm seeing the numbers of the wrench attacks, the crypto wrench attacks, like go through the roof in France, for example. Like you need protocols in the meat space to help you navigate the world as it is. Like what happens when you step out your door? What happens when you interact with the world? Even if you want to live in a ranch in the boonies somewhere, who are you going to trust? And so I think that it's going to be a big question. If you own Bitcoin, it's like, okay, well, who do I align myself with, and what kind of group am I going to be part of? I think we're just seeing that more and more, and it's also why things are getting so radicalized, because people are sensing that there's big change coming, and I somehow need to find an identity for myself, which means aligning myself with a certain institution, be it political or religious or just all kinds of different, and of course, a lot of Bitcoiners say like, oh, but I'm a cypherpunk. But I don't know if that, thin libertarianism, if that is substantial enough as a basis to navigate these coming 5 or 10 years of potential like pretty great chaos. So that's kind of a maybe an A side, but that's something that I've been thinking about a lot.
Lorenzo, 2030, beautiful kids, a lot of Bitcoin.
I think for us, it'd probably be the convergence of technologies and actually seeing, what we talk in big ideas, of all the technology platforms. I mean, I think Cathie, you can talk about this, like with Tesla. If we had to pick one company where we actually see that, it's probably Tesla, right? I mean,
well, the Musk.
Yeah, exactly.
I shall.
Yeah, no, okay. Go ahead.
So lots of thoughts there. Don't want to take too much time, but we do believe that the biggest revenue generating opportunity during the next 5 to 10 years is autonomous mobility of all kinds, autonomous taxis, drones for delivery, air taxis, and so forth. We think the taxi opportunity alone could scale to, I think from a market valuation point of view, $36 trillion from almost nothing now in the next 5 to 10 years. In other words, the wholesale transformation of transportation. That is the largest AI project we think on Earth. Now, the most profound AI project, and maybe some here will disagree, but you'll understand where we're coming from. The most profound AI project is in healthcare. We are going to diagnose diseases in their earliest stages or before as they're setting up. We're going to collapse the cost and time for drug discovery, and we're going to cure disease. So that's the second. But then, and I think Alex touched on this maybe a bit, but this idea that really we have two new worlds opening up, and this is why I'm not pessimistic on employment. Technology, the history of it is it's a net job creator. You can't imagine what a lot of the jobs are, but just ask ChatGPT and make sure to include futurists and science fiction, but you'll get all kinds of ideas. So what are the two worlds? Digital, when you think about it, many people think, oh, I've been there, done that, internet. No. We did not have immutable property rights until very recently, thanks to blockchain technology. So we are now just entering and creating a digital world that can be monetized and can evolve because of the monetization in ways that we cannot understand right now. Maybe we can imagine, and then the other new world is space. Space. When I hear Elon talk about, the orbital data center opportunity, with solar powering everything and taking us away from the bureaucracy here down on Earth and the not in my backyard here on Earth. We've got that. We've got the moon. We've got Mars. We've got a lot to do. And, so, all of this has to do with the convergences of technologies. And, so Tesla is robotics, energy storage, and AI. Healthcare is DNA sequencing, AI, and CRISPR gene editing. And if we didn't have Elon and this movement towards reusable rockets, we would be nowhere in space. But now he's opening up space in a way that most people, I'm going to say 5 to 10 years ago, did not believe would be possible.
I think that's really well said. And honestly, I was just about to message Ben Boxer and be like, hey, clip this at the end at this minute, because that was really well said. One of the two things I'll leave the audience with is, one is to download the Big Ideas 2026 report. Just search for ARK Invest Big Ideas 2026 report. And then Gladstein, I will give you a plug for your newsletter, which is just awesome to read every week. Just if you want to highlight that one time, because it's a must read. If you're interested in freedom tech and freedom, it's a great newsletter as well.
Yeah, financialfreedomreport.org. It's an awesome newsletter. Hits Thursday mornings, covers all the financial repression news in the world, and then shows how people are fighting back with open source code. We're also, to our general mailing list, doing a monthly AI newsletter, which is getting interesting as well. But thanks for all. Great chat, really fun, exciting times. Thanks for organizing, Rod.
Thank you,
Rod.
everybody.
Yeah,
absolutely.
ARK Invest is a registered investment advisor focused on investing in disruptive innovation. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions. It does not constitute, either explicitly or implicitly, any provision of services or products by ARK. All statements made regarding companies or securities are strictly beliefs and points of view held by ARK or podcast guests, and are not endorsements or recommendations by ARK to buy, sell, or hold any security. Clients of ARK Investment Management may maintain positions in the securities discussed in this podcast.